So you might be thinking to yourself in these trying times that the most important issues your politicians should be addressing are the price of gas. We're paying about $5, in some places it's up to $7. You might be thinking inflation, which is about at 8.5%, which by the way, the sponsor of today is going to be connected to inflation. Listen to that tie-in already. But in reality, what politicians are really concerned about, what our truest representatives are really concerned about, the progressives, which represent every American in the country, because I don't know if you know this, but all Americans are progressive. That's what I'm told repeatedly by the Young Turks and all the left-wing media, is of course the fact that you're a horrible, disgusting bigot if you don't want to use the term LatinX. Now, the reason this issue is being brought up yet again in this country for some reason, despite the fact that the American people and the Latino community have made it absolutely clear that they're not interested in this term, is because Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the Congresswoman from New York, has decided to call out everybody, including Democrats, for not being up to date with the modern progressive language, for not thinking of the non-conforming, gender non-binary otherkin when they talk to Spanish-speaking people who do not use this sound at all. But before we get into this issue that is more pressing, according to Ocasio-Cortez, than inflation, before we get into this issue that is more interesting than gas prices to her, we have a sponsor today. It's Noble Gold, inflation related. Listen to that tie-in. I nailed it. We'll talk about that and then we'll get to the other side. With inflation at 8.5% or maybe even higher, don't you think it's a good time to secure some of your assets and start hedging against inflation? Don't you think that maybe playing everything in the market is not the best idea? This is why I recommend you go over to noblegoldinvestments.com and think about starting a precious metals IRA. And luckily for you guys out there in my audience, if you go to noblegoldinvestments.com or call them at 877-646-5347, you listen to their experts and you decide to put a qualifying investment into Noble Gold, then you will receive as a gift a 3-ounce American Virtue coin, which is absolutely beautiful. And again, it is free with a qualifying account with them. Amazing in every possible way. noblegoldinvestments.com. Check it out today. So the video that we're going to talk about today comes from Ocasio-Cortez's Instagram story or something like that, and it just goes to show you that the lefties, the further left they are the smug people that look down on the rest of the American population, thumb their nose at you, and think that you're disgusting rubes because you cling to using a language the way it's actually intended and structured to be used, you horrible bigot. We're going to go into this, we're going to talk about it, we're going to make fun of it, and we're going to see if Ocasio-Cortez has any merit in this situation.
I wanted to have a note on gender inclusivity in Spanish language. People sometimes like to make a lot of drama over the term LatinX.
So I have to comment on the fact that Ocasio-Cortez is a year older than myself. She's over 30, she is a full-grown adult, and yet she still talks like a 16-year-old girl. She's like, people are making a lot of drama about the term LatinX, and she's moving around, it's all goofy and it's ridiculous. And she first opens up with this absurd notion that people, actual human beings, not dorks in academia, that were trying to fix the Spanish language because they hate the way these brown people speak their gendered language in Latin America. And yes, I know Spanish comes from Spain and Spain's full of white people, but calm down, calm down.
But even before Latinx, people were trying to do this, like, use an at to have the A and the O together.
They were using the Latin at term because it combines the A and the O, and this is what was popular well before LatinX. And in reality, in actuality, we all know what I'm about to say is 100% true. No, they weren't. You never saw the Latin at in your whole entire life. That is nonsensical in every possible way. If you ever wanted to believe that this was coming from the internet.com, this was coming from people who have nothing better to do than go online and complain about things that they don't understand, there's no greater example than the Latin at sign that Ocasio-Cortez swears that people were definitely using in this country before LatinX took over the nation by storm. It wasn't happening, no possible way. You're lying, you're being garbage, you're garbage in every way. Cut it out, stop talking. Oh my god, there's more of this video. We're only about 5 seconds in.
Gender is fluid, language is fluid, and I think people right now are using the E term as gender neutral in order to be as inclusive as possible.
Well, first of all, gender is not fluid. You're nonsensical about that, so that premise is garbage in every possible way. But language is fluid, which, by the way, is the #1 problem that you're running into, Ocasio-Cortez, because you're trying to cram this nonsense down, top down, on Spanish speakers who have no interest in your gender ideology, trying to correct the badness of their language that activists like you perceive.
And I think people right now are using the E term as gender neutral in order to be as inclusive as possible. Don't have to make drama over it.
When people say language is fluid or language is changing, that means language develops naturally. Certain phrases or words are brought up and eventually they catch on and they become a part of the lexicon of the language. What you're trying to do is use a term invented by a professor to solve a problem that did not need to be solved because you don't like the fact that the gender neutral terms in the Spanish language, like many love languages, are the male masculine nouns. Latinos covers not only men, but it covers all genders, mixed group of genders, everything included, men and women, both genders. It's all in there. You're trying to make a new term because you don't like that, and you're like, patriarchy, I'm upset about that, because you have nothing better to do with your time. And again, you're whining about this and saying, oh, you don't have to make drama about this because you have the intellectual capacity of a 16-year-old girl. And not even a big 16-year-old girl, a small 16-year-old girl.
I also have a mini rant about this because there are some politicians, including Democratic politicians, that rail against the term Latinx. And they're like, this is so bad. This is so bad for the party, like blah, blah, blah.
This is the progressive champion. This is the heir apparent to Bernie Sanders. This is the person who is supposed to lead us to the communist revolution, lead us to utopia, that all the progressives say, unlike the establishment Democrats, is uncorruptible. This is their warrior for the left-wing agenda in the future, and she's talking about how Democrats are saying this is so bad, and they don't like it, and it hurts the party, and I don't understand that because I'm using this voice every time I want to talk about it, because that's how I work, and that's how I'm communicating information on Instagram Live. Again, to the Democrats who realize that they're losing their grip on the Latino vote and are trying not to alienate them, it has to really bother you when you're dependent on close elections that this person who doesn't run in competitive elections is trying to crap all over you, attack you from the left flank, while simultaneously alienating the very people that you need in order to stay in power. The Democrats are going to get walloped this election. They're banking on January 6th. Where were you January 6th, the night that the Republic fell? I was in a car dealership buying a car, and then the guy tried to tell me that frame damage isn't serious damage and I should buy the car, and I was like, no, it is serious. But then I looked up and I saw a Republic getting frame damage, and I realized that was the serious damage. Where were you January 6th? Where were you? Let me know down in the comments below. And that's not going to work. That's not going to be a thing that's successful. So they need every single voter that they can possibly get, and using a term that only 3% of Latinos actually use, only about 27% have heard of, 24% of them hate the term, they're offended by the term, and the rest of them have no idea what it is not really good outreach to a voting bloc that is trending more Republican that you need to stave off the historic loss that is coming in the November midterms. But here's Ocasio-Cortez in a safe district. Here's Ocasio-Cortez with no possible way of being thrown out of office, telling you, no, you better use Latinx, bow to the intersectional agenda, and if you think it's going to cost you elections, she also has a message for you.
And like, it's almost as though it has not struck some of these folks that another person's identity is not about your reelection prospects. Like, this is not about you.
So what I love about these ideologues, what I love about these religious zealots of social justice, is that it's a purity spiral. They want you to destroy yourself to prove your worth constantly. So she's saying, look, you are worried about alienating the Hispanic vote and losing your election, but here's the thing. It's not about your election. It's bigger than your election. Let me make stupid faces at the camera while you lose votes because you have to use Latinx all over your literature, because I think that this is the stunning and brave and beautiful thing to do. Again, why are you so concerned about your prospects for election? It's not like you can't do anything at all in Congress. If you're not in Congress, what are you even thinking of? I mean, imagine this. Imagine if you're actually somebody, one of these dorks, who actually is on board with the whole Latinx thing, and you believe that Republicans are destructive to your identity, that Republicans are going to hurt you. Ocasio-Cortez thinks it's more important to be rhetorically correct and lose than to actually get into office and protect the supposedly marginalized people who are at risk every single day. That's her position on this. That's how out of touch she is, and that's because she's in one of these blue no matter who districts. So she thinks, I say stupid things every single day, I say the most woke progressive garbage all the time, and because my district is totally uncompetitive, which she seems to not be aware of, I keep winning re-election, so therefore, every progressive will win election in every race, and anytime they don't win an election, as we all know, it's due to corruption, because corruption is everywhere, and that's why the progressives lose. But if you just be more progressive, if you just double down, if you just talk down to the people who are telling you they don't want this term, they're not interested in this term, and they think that this term is offensive, which again, most of the people who have even heard of LatinX do think the term is offensive. If you just tell them to go pound snow, if you just tell them to get out of here, then you're gonna win millions of elections, communist utopia right around the corner.
Second of all, if putting a little X on your campaign literature is what you think is the difference between winning or losing an election, you need to talk about healthcare more. You need to raise people's wages. You need to talk about more issues that also matter to people.
So here Ocasio-Cortez says you need to talk about the real issues while she's simultaneously talking about this non-real issue, which doesn't make any sense. And it also doesn't make any sense because Democrats talking about healthcare might help them win elections, but when they actually act in the realm of healthcare, just like anybody who acts in the realm of healthcare, it means utter destruction. Obama's Democratic Party lost 1,000 seats across the country, state legislatures and Congress, because of Obamacare. People rejected it because the way that people feel about healthcare is that they don't like the system, but anybody who tries to alter the system, they ultimately end up hating. So yeah, actually doing healthcare legislation would not help the Democratic Party. It didn't help the Republican Party. It doesn't help anybody because people have a bias to what already exists. That's the main issue with this hypothesis that she has. And as far as raising people's wages, she's talking about raising the minimum wage, which of course creates more unemployment. But yeah, the minimum wage is actually popular because most people just think it's Americans getting a raise with no consequences, even though every single study shows the opposite. And the left always clings to one or two studies that show that the businesses passed on the modest wage increase to the consumer, and that's why they didn't fire people. But sure, Ocasio-Cortez, raise the wages through the government. Don't do anything like get out of the way of the economy that you're currently mucking up and flooding with money, which led to inflation. Whatever. Don't worry about the supply chain. You just need to talk about these things, and then it'll be fine. And say Latinx while you're doing it.
That being said, why are people opting for trying to use Latine over Latinx?
They're not. That's the answer to your question right there. Just like the Latin at thing, that's not a thing. Just like Latinx is not actually a thing. They're not doing that. You're wrong. You're incorrect. You're not even close. This Latine is absurd in every possible way, and you need to cut it out. But she's going to give us a lecture, so here we go.
Well, Latinx can be convenient in written form because you just put down an X and people can kind of mentally put in whatever vowel they identify with.
No, it's not. It's not convenient in written form. It is a spelling error. It doesn't go with the Spanish language. What are you even talking about? But again, let's hear her out. I may be cutting her off too soon. She might just blow our mind with how advanced and forward-thinking her language skills are.
But it's kind of hard to say. So Latine, you avoid the masculine O, you avoid the feminine A. Latine, E, is a little more neutral, so it could be more inclusive to people. For example, saying nosotres.
You know, there's a term for these lefties that I actually quite love, even though it's not in use as much as it used to be, and that is regressives, people who try to take you back. And one of the basics of civilization is having a written language that corresponds to the spoken language so that you can communicate the same information in the same language, both in its writing form and in its spoken form. The idea that we're going to make Latine, because that's easier to pronounce than Latinx, but we're going to write down Latinx on all the documents doesn't make any sense. You're just making crap up. You're changing the terms every 2 weeks and you're like, everybody get on board, otherwise you're a bigot. But it's so convenient, and that's why so many people, like the 5 professors that I talked to before I did this, because all I talked to is left-wing academics, said that this is what's happening in the grassroots. This is what people are doing. Stop using this term. Stop doing it. Latino is the term for gender-neutral masculine pronouns in love. love languages, which are gendered languages, often double for the neutral pronouns. Cut it out. Stop it. You're wrong. You're garbage. I don't like it. But again, let's hear about how she's our moral better.
That being said, if you don't want to use it, no one's forcing you to.
Now, the left has harped on this portion of the clip where Ocasio-Cortez isn't forcing you to use it. She's saying, if you don't want to use it, we're not forcing you. I mean, she's trying to compel Democrats to do it. She's trying to call them non-inclusive anti-transes, which is a non-starter among the left wing, but she's not forcing you to use it, and this is where most of the lefties cut off the clip. But the thing is, I actually listened to the whole clip, and if you let it play, you'll find out what the threat is under the nobody's forcing you.
That being said, if you don't want to use it, no one's forcing you to. But for people who enjoy trying to figure out language and have it meet the modern age, that's kind of where it's at.
You see that? That's always the tactic that they go with. If you don't want to use this term, nobody's forcing you. But the thing is, if you want to be a part of these people propelling us into the future, this forward-thinking people that are figuring out language and where it's at right now, at this time, right now, this second, this moment, if you want to be up to date and not a bigot, racist, transphobe, bigot, racist, homophobe, anti-gay, transphobia person, then this is where it's at. You just got to use all this unnatural language and pollute it and alienate the very voters that you need to not get destroyed in this election to win presidential elections in the future, because that's where it's at. I'm just forward thinking. You know what it is? It's just you're more in the past, you're more behind, you're more bigoted, and I'm literally you're better because I'm Ocasio-Cortez and I'm on Instagram Live and I'm making goofy faces when talking about words that people don't actually use while acting like I'm the better than the people who actually vote for Democrats, or hopefully, according to the Democrats, would vote for Democrats. And honestly, I'm all for it. I'm all for demanding that the left use these terms. I'm all for people trolling politicians to force them to use it, become fake activists on the internet on the Democratic side, just so we can watch them repeatedly alienate this base and we can forward the accelerating Hispanics to the Republican Party, which will undercut the Democratic power plans that they've been working on for decades in this country. And we can all laugh at them, and Ocasio-Cortez could tell us about how forward-thinking and how amazing she actually is for sticking to it as her party burns all around her. But hey, those are just my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you like the video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content. Follow me on all my social medias. You can support me via the support links in the description box of this video. This has been me talking about Ocasio-Cortez trying to be a linguistic authoritarian. Till next time.